Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 264, William Woodfall. In the Queensland Darling Downs Gazette on the 14th of January 1901, there was an article titled Sensational Bank Robbery. A sensation was caused at Grenfell, New South Wales on Wednesday night when it was reported that a large sum of money had been stolen from the Union Bank by William Woodfall, the accountant. Woodfall was granted a few days' holiday to attend the Commonwealth celebrations in Sydney, and as he did not return when his leave expired, the reserve money was calculated and found to be £4,100 short. Woodfall had written to his father-in-law, who resides at Temora, stating that he'd hidden 1,000 sovereigns in a certain place in a house which he was to get for the keep of his wife and children. The money was found in the place mentioned and at once handed over to the bank manager. So who was William Woodfall and what possessed him to commit this act? William Hernan Woodfall was born on the 24th of January 1875 in St Kilda, Victoria, to Arthur Woodfall and Mary Shields. Arthur was English and Mary was Scottish, and they'd married on the 11th of April 1871 in East Melbourne, when Mary was 22 and Arthur 31. They had 4 children, with William being the second born. William married Ella Blanche Smith in Temora, New South Wales on the 16th of March 1898. Ella was the daughter of a station manager from Maitland, New South Wales, who'd moved his family to Temora by 1903. Her parents' names were Henry Smith and Sarah Ann Cummings. William and Ella had 11 children. At the time that Woodfall had committed this act, it was thought that he'd been drinking heavily and he was deranged. The money had been conveyed to Sydney in a portmanteau. When Woodfall was questioned by the driver of the cab about the weight of his bag, he stated that he was taking a large sum of money from the local branch of the bank to the head office. 2 days before that article was in the paper outlining what William had done, on the 12th of January 1901 in the Brisbane Telegraph, there was an advertisement, William Woodfall, wire your father in Melbourne, everything arranged. The next day, the police are still in search of William Hernan Woodfall, whose accounts in the Grenfell branch of the Union Bank of Australia are said to be deficient to the extent of over £4,000. Woodfall is 26 and went on leave and did not return when his holiday expired. Then in the Sydney Evening News on the 14th of January 1901, the Grenfell sensation. The man who was reported in Friday evening's news as missing, coincidentally with £4,100 from Grenfell, where he was employed in the Union Bank of Australia, is named William Hernan Woodfall and is about 26 years of age. He'd been employed in the branch of the bank referred to for almost 2 years. While in Sydney for the recent holidays, he stayed at a hotel in Newtown. It had been ascertained that he left Sydney, as he was expected to do, by the night train on the 6th of January, though he did not make his appearance at Grenfell. A resident of Gundagai had informed the police that he travelled by the same train and that a man answering Woodfall's description got out at Harden. As another statement is to the effect that he was seen in Sydney a couple of days ago, some importance is attached to this assertion. Woodfall's medium height and build, fair complexion, wearing a light brown moustache. He is described as having a slight turn in his nose. Information gained by the detectives on Saturday indicated that Woodfall had gone to Brisbane. On the 14th of January 1901 in the Yass Evening Tribune, concerning the absence of the bank official from the Union Bank at Grenfell, further particulars are to hand. A good deal of the missing money has been recovered in one place or another. On the 15th of January in the Singleton Argus, it said that the police were still in search of William Woodfall. And then on the next day in Sydney, it was announced in the Government Gazette that a warrant had been issued by the Water Police Bench for the arrest of William Woodfall, charged with having, on the 29th of December 1900 at Grenfell, stolen £4,100, the property of the Union Bank of Australia Limited. His description was 26 years of age, 5'7", slight build, fair complexion, a delicate appearance, clean-shaved, nose slightly inclined to one side, wore a black sack coat and vest, light trousers and a terrai hat, had large portmanteau and heavy handbag, may wear blue eyeglasses. Lately an accountant at the Grenfell branch of the Union Bank, last seen in Sydney on the evening of the 6th. £100 reward,
The clothing may be marked David Jones & Co. or Hand in Hand Tailoring Company, Sydney, believed to have a large amount of money with him. And again, in the Queensland newspapers, the Brisbane Queenslander, on the 19th of January 1901, his father's placed the ad again. William Woodfall, wire your father, Melbourne, everything arranged. Then on the 23rd of January, in the Police Gazette, it added William Woodfall, now described as having the first finger of the right hand somewhat deformed from the effects of a rifle shot. Nearly 2 weeks after he'd not returned to Grenfell, in the Charters Towers Mining Standard of Queensland, on the 24th of January 1901, it states that in Brisbane, at the police court, that William Woodfall, a native of Victoria, was charged with the larceny of £4,100, the property of the Union Bank at Grenfell, New South Wales. He was undefended and remanded until the 31st to permit the New South Wales Police to arrive with a warrant. He was arrested at Toowoomba. The police found in his portmanteau £1,650, chiefly in Union banknotes, and another £339 were found in his portmanteau at the Imperial Hotel in Brisbane, where he stayed prior to his departure for Toowoomba. First Class Constable Carew deposed that he went to Toowoomba on Wednesday morning, accompanied by Constable Gunn, where they saw the accused in the Royal Hotel. The accused accompanied them to Brisbane last night. The witness produced a provisional warrant which he read to the accused this morning, and the accused replied, "That is all right." When asked if he had any questions to ask the constable, he said, "Were there any horses and harness you retained?" Witness said yes, there were 2 saddle hacks, 2 bridles and saddles. When the constable and the warrant arrived, the accused would again be brought up before the court. The accused was remanded and no bail was asked for. Then he went to court, and it stated that the defendant, who is somewhat boyish in appearance, clean-shaven and bespectacled, was attired in a tailor-made suit of an olive grey colour, a high-fitting collar and a bright-hued necktie. In the dock, he presented a passive demeanour, evincing apparently no interest in the proceedings. On the 31st of January 1901, in the Maitland Daily Mercury of New South Wales. In Sydney, the Wanderers return. William Woodfall was brought back to Sydney by the Brisbane mail train this morning under the escort of Sergeant Roberts. And on the 2nd of February 1901 in the Tomorrow Star, the Grenfell Bank robbery, the story of his movements. At the Water Police Court on Wednesday in Sydney, William Woodfall, a native of Victoria and a clerk by occupation, was charged with stealing the sum of £4,100, the property of the Union Bank of Australia, Limited at Grenfell, on or about the 29th of December 1900. The accused asked for bail, but the application was refused. William Woodfall was arrested at Toowoomba last week and arrived from Brisbane by train this morning in charge of Sergeant Roberts of Grenfell. He was conveyed to the Water Police Station. During a conversation there, Woodfall described his doings from the time of his departure from Grenfell, stating that after being in Sydney for some days, he journeyed by train to Melbourne. He remained in Melbourne for 1 day, going under the name of Anderson, and then took passage by the steamer the Sintra for Brisbane, arriving there undetected and staying at a hotel in the city for a week under the name of Archer. He then went to the Toowoomba show where his arrest was effected. On the way to Brisbane, the Sintra called into Sydney and remained a day, and shortly after her departure northwards, detectives Roach and Brown, who'd unsuccessfully traced all of the accused movements in Sydney, became aware of his presence on board. As it was impossible for them to secure him, they reported the matter to the Inspector General of Police, who telegraphed the officers of the Criminal Investigation Department in Brisbane, notifying them of the fact. When the Sintra was brought up at Brisbane, a number of detectives searched for the wanted man but were unable to find him and wired back to Sydney stating that he was not on board. Referring to that incident, Woodfall stated that he knew the detectives were after him, but he made no effort to hide and was standing alongside one of them when they came on board and walked off the boat unquestioned. Detectives Roach and Brown, who carried out their investigations in a most complete manner, were amazed when the wire arrived stating that Woodfall was not on the Sintra, but notwithstanding the assurance to the contrary, they held strongly to the opinion that he was on board that vessel when it was put in at Brisbane. Detective Roach asked that the accused be remanded to Grenfell and gave evidence to the effect that when he and Detective Brown were taking Woodfall from Redfern Station to the Water Police Court on Thursday, he said, "I stole the money from the bank, I changed the gold in Sydney for notes, but they'll have a job in proving how I did it." Woodfall was remanded to Grenfell and left for that place on Friday night. On the 12th of February, he was committed for trial, and on the 30th of March 1901 in the Sydney Evening News. In Grenfell, Woodfall has been convicted of the robbery from the branch of the Union Bank here, of which he is an official, and sentenced to 18 months hard labour in Goulburn Jail. On examination, 3,000 sovereigns were found to be missing, 1,000 of which afterwards were discovered in a place indicated in a letter to a friend. Woodfall was subsequently arrested in Queensland and a greater portion of the money was recovered. He's recorded living in Oakleigh, Victoria, with his wife Ella in 1903 in Neerim Road, and his occupation is listed as a dairyman. By 1905, they'd moved to Wangaratta in Victoria. Then 1905, they were living in Temora. And then by September 1906, they were back in Wangaratta. They were still there in 1909, where William was listed as an accountant. And then by 1912, they were living in Ballarat, and 1916 in Chapman Street, North Melbourne. William enlisted in World War I on the 4th of April 1918 when he was 43. He stated he was an accountant and an estimator on his records. On the 5th of April 1918 in the Melbourne Herald, it says Arthur H. Woodfall of 34 Malvern Grove, Malvern, enlisted at the Town Hall Recruiting Depot on the 28th of March on his 18th birthday and has gone into camp. Yesterday, his father, Mr. William H. Woodfall, 43, volunteered at the Town Hall Depot for active service with his son. Mr. Woodfall was rejected by the medical officer, Major Griffiths, who afterwards declared that he'd never seen a man so keen to join the army. While on a birth certificate of his second youngest child, Alan Gray, he's credited with being an accountant and articled clerk. For the latter part of his life, while his health allowed, he ran a bookstore and a library called the Queensbury Lending Library in Queensbury Street, North Melbourne. And in 1924, he's listed as a valuer living in Chapman Street in North Melbourne with his wife Ella. On the 13th of July 1927, in the Melbourne Sun News Pictorial, under the Missing Friends column, William Hernan Woodfall, sometimes calling himself Jim Woods, anyone knowing of him, please communicate with his mother in Auburn. He was 52 at this time. Family members said that he could be quite cantankerous in his latter years and he alienated most of his children. He was apparently quite caring and helpful to a distant nephew, Frank William Woodfall, who'd moved to Australia in 1950 and had gone through a messy divorce. It was with Frank William that he shared much of the family knowledge and passed on his data and letters to him. Ella died on the 18th of August 1944 in North Melbourne at the age of 68. In her death notices, it does say that she's the beloved wife of William H. Woodfall, and the loving mother of Thelma, who's Mrs. Baker, Arthur, Stuart, Harry, Carrie, who's Mrs. Johnson, Ken, Billy, who's deceased, Nellie, Eunice, Mrs. Blee, and Alan. William's brother Jack also placed a notice in the paper in loving sympathy of my sister-in-law. 2 years after her death, there were memoriams placed in the paper, and they were placed separately by her children, Alan, Jack, Nell, Kel, Thel, and then there were 2 from her grandchildren. William Hernan Woodfall was living in 288 Hampshire Road in Sunshine, Victoria in 1949 and was listed as a process worker, and he died in 1962 in Dingley, Victoria. Their children, the firstborn Thelma was born on the 18th of March 1898 in Temora, New South Wales. She married Aubrey James Baker in 1922 in Victoria, and she died in 1980 in Queensland at the age of 82. The second child was Arthur Henry Woodfall, known as Boy, who was born on the 23rd of March 1900 in Temora. On the 29th of April 1910, in the Benalla Standard, it says a boy named Arthur Woodfall met with a painful accident on Monday at his parents' residence at Wangaratta. He poured some kerosene on the fire and the resulting flames badly scorched his face and neck. Arthur enlisted in World War I on the 28th of March 1918, as mentioned earlier. He stated he was a stockman and he listed his father, living in Malvern, Victoria, as his next of kin. He was discharged in February 1920 and married Gladys Baum in Horsham on the 7th of March 1922. He was a tile layer in 1924 and living in Chapman Street just up the road from his parents. And he died on the 18th of August 1955 in Kensington, Victoria at the age of 55. And his death notice reads, on the 18th of August at his residence, beloved husband of Gladys and loving father of Robert, Arthur deceased, Donald and Barry. His siblings also put a notice in. Arthur Henry Woodfall, known as Boy, first AIF, eldest son of William H. and the late Ella B. Woodfall, beloved brother of Thelma, Mrs. Aubrey Baker, Stuart, Harry, Caroline, Mrs. A. Joyson, Kenneth deceased, Francis, William, known as Billy, deceased, Nellie, Eunice, Mrs. Blee, and Alan. So the next child was Stuart Hernan Woodfall, who was born on the 11th of March 1905 in Temora. In the Victorian Horsham Times on the 20th of October 1925, housebreaking and theft, 2 youths steal food. At the Horsham Police Court on Friday, 2 young men named William Jones and Stuart Woodfall were charged with having on the 9th of October at Dewan Road, in company with each other, broken and entered into the dwelling of James Kemp and stole 6 pounds of beef, a loaf of bread, a pound of butter, a tart, a tin plate and a saucer to the value of 10 shillings. Constable Shields said that he found the defendants 2 miles from Dewan. He asked them where they'd come from. Jones said they'd walked from Horsham. He was dressed in a blue suit and gave the name of William Simons. The witness told them they were suspected of having stolen property in their possession. Neither of them replied. He searched Jones's swag and found a loaf of bread, a lump of butter, a saucer and a tin plate. Asked where he got them, he replied he got them from a house, pointing towards Horsham. He said he got them while his cobber kept watch. He asked how he got into the house and he said he got through the window. He then searched Woodfall's swag and found 7 or 8 pounds of beef in a white bag. He said he was with his cobber when he got it, adding that they'd not had a feed for 2 days and that's why they did it. The witness then placed them under arrest and brought them to the Horsham Police Station, where they made statements taken down in writing and signed by each of the accused. In his statement, Jones said he was 19 years of age and resided at North Melbourne. He entered the house by lifting up the window. Woodfall stayed outside and Jones gave him the beef. Woodfall in his statement said he was 21 and resided at North Melbourne and he came to Horsham to get work. Mr Bennett pled for the charge to be altered to larceny. It was a trumpery case. There were degrees of housebreaking and he thought the ends of justice would be served by making this case of larceny. Assuming the goods had been outside, the degree of offence was not very much greater by going into the house and taking them. Woodfall had been working in the paint business and they seemed both decent lads. They chose to be dealt with summarily by pleading guilty. Mr Bennett pointed out that what they'd done was a foolish prank. The lads already had a week in jail and it has had its effects on them. The parents were here and were prepared to take them back. The bench imposed a fine of £3 each in default of 1 month's imprisonment, and Mr Williams said he hoped it would be a lesson to them. Stuart married Grace Elizabeth Douglas in 1941 and they lived in the same street as his parents in 1943, where Stuart was working as an iron dresser. In 1954 they were living at Footscray North, where Stuart was working as a furnaceman, and he died on the 9th of April 1973 in Hawthorn, Victoria, at the age of 68. The next child was Harry Sinclair Woodfall, who was born on the 8th of September 1906 in Wangaratta. In 1928 and 1931, he was living with his mother and brother Stuart and working as a packer. On the 20th of July 1940, he married Elma Selina Rosalie Locardi when they were 33, and he died on the 24th of December 1999 at Leopold, Victoria, at the age of 93. The next child was Caroline Helen Woodfall, who was born on the 31st of December 1908 in Wangaratta. In 1931, she was living with her mother and her brothers and working in sales. She married Albert Joinson on the 28th of March 1936 in Victoria. Albert was a launderer and they lived in Caulfield West and had 2 children, Mary and George. Caroline died on the 5th of May 1991 in Elstonwick, Victoria, at the age of 82. The 6th child was Kenneth Noel Woodfall, who was born on the 9th of September 1909 in Wangaratta. On the 2nd of January 1923 in the Melbourne Herald, it says, "Boy missing. Inquiries are being made by the police and by Mr W.H. Woodfall to the whereabouts of his son, Kenneth Noel Woodfall, 13, a sturdily built boy who disappeared from their home in Chapman Street, North Melbourne, at 6 o'clock yesterday morning. He's wearing a blue and white striped jumper suit, black boots and socks, and is dark-haired." According to at least one of his sisters, Kenny Woodfall was born with a severe mental deficiency. They said he had the happiest outlook on life of the whole family. He used to push his barrow around the markets in Melbourne, and while doing this, he was killed by being struck by a motor vehicle. He was only 37. On the 26th of February 1947 in the Albury Border Morning Mail, it outlined the sequel to the truck accident, and it says at the conclusion of an inquest into the deaths of Alfred Pedder, 45, Brunswick labourer, and Kenneth Noel Woodfall, 37, of Elstonwick, invalid pensioner, the city coroner committed Daniel William Fox, 25, of Williamstown, a labourer, on trial for 2 charges of manslaughter. Petter and Woodfall died from the injuries received through being knocked down by a truck negligently driven by Fox. Mrs. Marion Attard of Sunshine said she was walking with her sister in Errol Street, North Melbourne, at 2 p.m. on January the 5th. They heard a crash and a motor truck went past at high speed. It struck Woodfall and threw him against a wall. It struck a veranda post, which it splintered, bringing down the veranda, and continued zigzagging and struck and wrecked a spring cart in which Petter and children were travelling. Police evidence said that when they interviewed Fox regarding the accident, he appeared to have been drinking. The truck involved was a stolen vehicle. On the 14th of January 1949, in the Melbourne Argus, his family put memoriams in. Loving memories of a dearly loved brother and uncle away in the beautiful somewhere, inserted by Thel, Ella, Dulcie, Stuart and Peter. And another one in loving memory of our dear brother and uncle Kenneth Knoll, treasured memories, inserted by Kel, Orb, Mary and George. And in memory of my dear brother Kenneth Knoll, forever in my thoughts, inserted by his loving sister Nell. The seventh child was Francis William Woodfall, who was born on the 11th of October 1910 in Wangaratta. He married Constance Jean May Beach in 1934. However, he died on the 4th of October 1935 in South Melbourne, aged only 24. On the 12th of October 1935 in the Melbourne Weekly Times, it outlines the cause of his death. When he grasped a live electric wire at Morgan's Dairy in South Melbourne on Sunday afternoon, Francis William Woodfall, a milk carter of Glen Huntly, received a charge of 230 volts and was electrocuted. The dairy is being remodelled and the power line was hanging down from the conduit tubing in a newly erected wall. Woodfall was delivering milk at the dairy, and as he walked up a ramp to the platform where milk cans are unloaded, he caught hold of the wire. He was unable to release his grip and called out to Albert Jenkins, another employee, who broke the circuit with a piece of wood. Woodfall collapsed and a doctor and civil ambulance attendant supplied artificial respiration for 20 minutes, but without success. On the 6th of October 1938, his family placed the death notices in the Melbourne Sun News Pictorial. In loving memory of my dear husband, Francis William, Billy, accidentally killed. Inserted by his loving wife, Constance Woodfall. In memory of my brother Francis William, Billy. In the prime of his life he was taken just when his hopes were high. He lived to make others happy. Oh, why did he have to die? Inserted by his brother Stuart. And from Elmer and Bill, in loving memory of our dear brother-in-law, Francis William, Billy. Ella placed one in loving memory of my dear son, Francis William, Billy. There will come a day when God will tell each mother why he took her son away. And Thelma and Jack placed in treasured memories of our dear Billy. Kel and Albert Joinson, so sister Kel, in loving memory of our dear brother Billy. And his sister Nell also put in a notice in loving memory of my dear brother Billy. And Boy and Gladys and family in loving memory of our brother and uncle. The next child was Nellie, known as Nin, who was born on the 19th of March 1912 in Ballarat. In 1934, she was living at home with her mother and siblings in North Melbourne. In 1977, she was living at Elstonwick and she worked as a packer. She did not marry and she died on the 17th of November 1987 in Melbourne at the age of 75. The ninth child was Eunice. She was born on the 15th of November 1913 in Ballarat. She married Rudolph Blee on the 13th of February 1932 in Victoria when she was 18 and Rudolph 24. Rudolph was a stevedore and they lived in North Croydon in 1963, and she died on the 16th of May 2003 in Bayswater, Victoria at the age of 89. The 10th child was Alan Gray Woodfall, who was born on the 17th of May 1916 in North Melbourne. He enlisted in World War II on the 23rd of August 1940. His father, William, was listed as his next of kin. He only served until the 28th of July 1941 as he was classed as being in a reserved occupation. He was employed as a fitter and turner to assist the war effort rather than serving. He married Penelope Christine Foxley Connolly in 1943 in Victoria when he was 27 and Penelope 21. They had a son Gary in the year that they married on the 28th of October 1943 in Elstonwick. In 1949 they were living in Shepparton where he worked as a coach painter, and by 1958 were living in Mackay, Queensland. They seem to have separated and divorced at some point as Penelope remarried and Alan married Layla Doreen Moffat, née Ryan, in 1965. He was the father of 4 known children, and he died on the 4th of September 1990 in Elstonwick at the age of 74. And their 11th child only lived one day, Mary Woodfall, who was born on the 2nd of August 1918 and died on the 3rd of August 1918. So it seems for William Woodfall that despite the sentence that he received, he did return to his wife and provide for the children. However, it seems at some point, particularly after Ella passed away, that his relationships with his children were quite fraught.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.